Thank you to Tamer Eins for inviting me to speak. And when I was putting this presentation together, there's a slide on the values that we have at Guardian News and Media, and one of them is honesty. So I'm taking this moment to say that I'm really nervous presenting in front of such a lot of people in such a big space. So if I go red, and if I get a dry mouth, and if I look at you blankly and have forgotten my words, then you know it's because I am actually really nervous. So I thought I'd name that and get it out the way. So yeah, I'm here to talk about how Guardian News and Media engages with our readers and our advertisers on the topic of carbon footprinting. That's a move away, I think, from what the majority of presentations have been on, which is sector-specific carbon footprinting. So I hope you find it interesting and a different kind of angle on this area. So a bit of background, I guess, before we move on. Guardian News and Media, we have 3 publications that we print and publish. So that's, for those who don't know, it's the Guardian, Monday to Saturday Guardian, the Sunday Observer, which is, I think, the oldest UK Sunday paper. And then we also have guardian.co.uk, which I think is seen globally by about 30 million unique users every month. So it just gives it a bit of context. And I guess it's really important for us to talk about how we're owned, because it's very unique and it allows us to take the long-term view of what it means to be a successful and sustainable business. But essentially, The Guardian was founded in 1821 by a chap called C.P. Scott. He's the guy on the bicycle that you can see behind there. And he established The Guardian to support social reform. And the Scott Trust was actually created when he died in 1936 by his son. And his son basically voluntarily renounced all the financial interests in the business for himself and his family, putting all his shares, which were worth about £1 million at the time, which is obviously quite a lot back in 1936, into a trust. And that was to secure The Guardian's independent liberal journalism. And the core purpose of the trust moving forward, and still to this day is why we're here, is to secure the financial and editorial independence of The Guardian in perpetuity. Before I got to The Guardian, I didn't know what in perpetuity meant. So for those of you who aren't English, that means forever. Those journalists and their fancy words, eh? And to remain faithful to its kind of liberal tradition. And so we are also recognised, especially with guardian.co.uk, we really recognise the need to promote the causes of freedom of press and liberal journalism around the world. And those are just some of the key values that C.P. Scott wove into the fabric of The Guardian when it was created back in 1821. And they're still very much how we make business decisions and how we look at the long-term value and culture of the company, which is why I just wanted to spend a moment acknowledging the fact that we're aiming to be a kind of leader in sustainability within the media sector. And we've chosen to do this and be quite explicit in naming it because the values that you saw on the previous slide and what it means to be a sustainable business are very similar. So at G&M, when we talk about being a leader on sustainability within the media industry, we mean this in its widest sense, from addressing social concerns in our local and our global communities to environmental issues such as what we're here to talk about today, which is carbon footprinting, but also to identifying the business benefits by developing new and environmental and ethical revenue streams. And it also includes the health both of G&M and the staff. In order to achieve the sustainability vision, what we've done is divide the business into 5 key areas. And each business area has its own roadmap, which states how they'll contribute to the overall company vision. So as I've already said, I won't be covering our own carbon footprinting strategy, except to mention that our approach is to measure, manage and reduce, and to also mention that we work with partners to reduce carbon in the local and global communities, and the companies and the partnerships that we work with are organisations like Sandbags, who retire carbon credits, Converging World, who help us work with local schools to educate them on carbon literacy, and Sea Change, who help build sustainable communities in India. I'm not going to talk about how we're developing environmental and ethical opportunities, because that's not the brief either. But again, I'm really happy to have discussion at the next coffee break, or if people are interested, I'm really happy to share information through Jakob further down the line. So finally, how we engage with our readers on the issue of carbon footprinting. Specifically, I want to talk about the relaunch of Environment Guardian, which happened in September of last year. In a time of economic tightening, I guess, we managed to receive investment for the launch of Environment, or the relaunch of Environment Guardian. And I just wanted again to reiterate the fact that we had to give a business model and business reasoning as to why we did that. So we built a sales case based on 3 areas, and I'll go through those as we're covering the editorial content. But however, we always judge success criteria by whether we can whether we're looking at influence, whether we're increasing our reach, or whether we can justify financial return. So, Environment Guardian launched in September, as I said, and that gave us a real opportunity to look at what we were doing previous to that, what our strengths were and what our weaknesses were, and what the opportunities were in the market for us to move into. And I think we already have a reputation, we're very fortunate, we have a reputation for creating excellent, investigative, I think fact-driven editorial. In fact, C.P. Scott wrote an essay of which he coined the phrase, "Facts are sacred," and again, that stays with us whenever we're looking at our editorial and how we judge our editorial content. So it's absolutely core to what we do, so we continue to produce high-quality content, as you can see on the left-hand side. And I think I pulled off a screen grab from the other day which says our UK input emissions are the highest in Europe. So again, as you can see, up to date, really a fact-based editorial. What we have done is, and this isn't this isn't specific to the environment site itself, but it's across the whole of theguardian.co.uk, is we're really trying to develop our community and our sense of community and recognise that actually our readers also have valid comments, and it's really important that we engage with them from a conversational perspective and get so that they have the ability to have their voice heard as well. We also recognise the importance and the complexities around carbon footprinting, so again we were able in September to dedicate an entire section to carbon footprinting. And then, as you can see on the right hand side, we've also launched the Guardian Environment Editorial Network, and again this kind of backs up how we live our values and how we're trying to give a platform to the many voices that are out there. So the Environment Network gives editorially approved sites the amplification and the exposure that they rightly deserve. There's a few examples there. I mean, there's about 20, maybe 20 sites that are in the network, but here we've got Business Green, Carbon Commentary, Climate Change Core, there's GRIST. You know, they're absolute experts in their fields, and there's no way that we would be able to commission or to employ the number of journalists that we would need to cover each of those areas. So actually opening up a platform for experts to come in and discuss their point of view is a win-win situation, because for us, we're bringing in the experts. For them, it gives them exposure, and for our readers, it gives them more content and actually more relevant information. We've also made a decision to put data at the heart of what we're doing, and it's become absolutely core to our editorial stance. And I think that's why I found this conference so fascinating, because obviously, you know, everything that we've talked about is the need for, I love this, harmonisation of data. Never knew that existed as a phrase until I came here. But for us, the need for data is absolutely crucial to what we're doing, because it helps provide evidence behind the stories. And we also believe there's a role for us to play in acting as a repository for all the free, publicly available data sets that are out there that, again, wouldn't necessarily be found if we weren't there trying and stating this as an intention. I think just as an example, we currently host over 200 of WRI's data sets, and what we do is open up that data to a number of developers who then take that data and create amazing visuals, like you can see on the left-hand side, which is all about the carbon footprinting of individual countries since Kyoto. We also built a carbon calculator, which is on the right-hand side. And we built that in-house to help individuals get a meaningful sense of the contribution to, and their contribution to climate change, and what they can do, more importantly, to reduce it. And it's really interesting because I've been involved in a number of conversations about what can a consumer or what can a citizen actually do about their own carbon footprint. I'm sure it's not perfect, and I certainly don't know the technicalities behind this. But again, any questions, I'll direct them to the relevant people back at The Guardian. But again, we created the tool in response to the fact that I think, although there are loads of calculators out there, none of them really kind of do what we feel at The Guardian that they should do. One problem is that existing calculators tend to focus exclusively on the consumption of gas, electricity, car fuel, and flights, and that makes up probably about half of the average carbon footprint. The other half is obviously made up of all the other goods and services that we consume and that we purchase, whether that's food, gadgets, healthcare, clothes. And these are indirect emissions largely get left out of the carbon calculators that we found. So our tool includes them and aims to provide a much more kind of rounded view, and also gives some comparisons to other people around the world, and also what we as individual citizens are responsible for. So it's really easy, go and have a play, and we're also really interested in taking this carbon calculator forward and opening it up to companies or organisations who want to maybe add data to the back end of this, so we can start tracking consumer behaviours and citizen behaviours and social change. So I'd be really interested to discuss that. I think the main area of focus for us when we relaunched the Environment Guardian was to move away, I think, from our core editorial content, which previous to the launch was probably very scientific and academic based, and largely, for want of a better word, for the dark green consumer. They only account for probably between 5-10% of our audience, so there's still, as is the kind of majority rule, there's still 80-90% even of Guardian's audience that are really confused, feel disempowered, all the things that we've been talking about basically over the last 2 days. So we really felt that we had an opportunity to move into that space and start, I guess, interacting with our readers to empower them, to make positive changes and to do it in a reasonable and feasible way. We've also got great journalists. Lucy Siegel, for those of you who aren't in the UK, she basically appears on a program on BBC One at 7 o'clock virtually every night. So we have these almost stars, and we just wanted to pull them out of where they were previously, which is writing print columns, to becoming part of the community and becoming part of this kind of ethical living community. And it's also about kind of, I guess, adding a light touch to all of this. So as you can see, one of the articles there, which I haven't read yet, is, "Can I buy underwear and be green?" So I'll read that and get back to you. And it's about as well providing content on numerous platforms, so not everybody wants to read really heavy articles. So we're using video content, we're using audio content to again connect with readers in whatever way that they want. And I guess the final point that we wanted to focus on was partnering. We don't normally partner with organisations that are kind of activist-based. But what we did do is decide to support 1010. Are most people familiar with 1010? Okay. So it's basically a major climate change campaign called 1010, and it was created, I guess, in the response to a sense that Copenhagen was going to fail, and actually, if it did fail, what could be done to help create grassroots change and to, again, think about empowering people. So Ian Katz, our deputy editor, is really closely linked with this and is absolutely committed to it. And the basic aim is to get individuals and organisations to commit to reducing their carbon footprint by 10%. It was in 2010, but they recognised, obviously, that that can move into 2011, and so the story goes on. And it's to inspire collective action and to help bring about meaningful change. And we'll continue to follow this regularly throughout the year, and I think also in 2011. Businesses can also sign up to 1010, as I've said, and I guess for those that do, it's just a case of most businesses are already collecting this data, so it's just a piece of added value to get some editorial coverage in The Guardian and to be alongside other thought leaders in this space. And also, in addition, we at G&M have committed to cutting our own emissions by 10% by focusing on energy use and travel. How am I doing for time? Fine. Okay, so that's how we engage with our readers. What I also wanted to do is take the case study of ecometrics, as Jakob said. And again, I find myself in this really unusual space of, for us, ecometrics was born out of a desire to bring carbon and CO2 literacy to life within the commercial department at The Guardian, because I think it can be very intangible. And we have a department called Guardian Plus. So anything that you see in a newspaper, wherever you are, whether it's anything that's not an ad, so whether it's a supplement or whether it's a microsite or whether it's a sponsored podcast, we call those content solutions. And we recognised about 2 years ago that nearly a quarter of their revenue was related to green and ethical messages. So it was almost like an open door for us to go and work with them to see what was happening and to see what was going on and how we could make it meaningful and how we could bring CO2 into the conversation. So what we're doing is using our sphere of influence as well within the advertising industry and the creative industry to engage with our key clients and key stakeholders within the advertising industry to actually, like, as I've just said, bring CO2 into the conversation. Because for me, and this is only my opinion, but for me, the media and the marketing industries have almost been it feels like the last sector to connect with the need to move to a low-carbon economy, despite the fact that we as clients and as brands are also looking at this. So it's an interesting dilemma, and it's just one that I feel quite passionately about. So it's something that I suddenly have found myself having developed a carbon footprinting tool and thinking, I don't really know what to do with this. So I'm here basically to ask for help. So what is it? Well, basically, as it says there, it's an online service that it's a piece of software, and we work with a company called Nautilus. We've spent 1.5 years working with them to really simplify the system so that it could be actually used by the content solutions team. And on a very basic level, what it does is we've identified how we can create a media schedule within the commercial department. And when I mean media schedule, I'm referring to print supplements, web-based microsites, events that are sponsored, videos that are commercially driven, audio, mobile, promotional ads. And if you take that mix, that's not dissimilar to what you'd find a media planner in an advertising agency planning on. So it's just a very micro version of that. And we're doing it, I guess, to increase our knowledge. We know what the carbon footprint is of The Guardian, per se. From a commercial perspective, we're really interested to know what impact we have on the business by creating additional content. So all the content that is in addition to the printed paper or the website. And on a very simple level, we feel that if we can't measure something, then we can't change it. So it's a start for us in a journey of understanding how we can build low-carbon business practices into the work that we do within the advertising department. It helps that we're demonstrating thought leadership. Again, we have the values, we're beholden to those values. We have a desire to think about long-term success of society and business in general. And, for us, if it means that we're seen as thought leaders in this space against our competitors, then we can deal with that. We're happy with that. Clearly, it will provoke debate. As I was saying, I don't think the media industry and the advertising industry has necessarily connected with this before. And whenever I take this out at the moment, the main question is what do I want people to do with the data? And again, my only response back to that is that this is the start of a journey. And it's also to encourage industry best practice, and I think The Guardian is a unique position to aim to do that. And I think I put this slide in yesterday, and I'm very unfamiliar, I guess, with the whole process of product carbon footprinting and making sure that I've covered all the areas. But as you can see, for me, there seems to be in that chain, there seems to be a big bit missing. You know, there's the distribution, circulation, and sales of product, and then there's the consumption of it. But it seems the bit that's missing is actually also what is the marketing and the media impact on, and what is the impact on the stuff that we create in order to help sell brands. So that's, for me, what Ecometrics does. This is what it looks like. I thought it was easier to do screen grabs rather than go through it up there, so it might not be as clear as I want it to be. But basically, like I said, it's taken 1.5 years to create something simple. I never realized it took so long to make something simple, but there you go, it did. It's very easy to use, and that's because, again, like I was saying before, this is with the sales team. They're incredibly busy. They're writing 5-10 proposals a day. If this was in a media agency, they'd be changing a media schedule 15 times a day, 15 times an hour even. So if we want to bring CO2 into a conversation and start thinking about how CO2 can be used as a metric within the advertising arena, it has to be really simple. So as you can see, it's really easy. On the left-hand side, that's the page where you say what campaign, what agency, what client you're working with. And then the bit underneath at the moment, that just says The Guardian, because obviously we're using it in-house. But hopefully you can see that it feels like this would be very easy to magnify it, so that we, rather than just talk about The Guardian, we talk about other media owners. And actually we start talking about platforms, so we start talking about print products, online products, cinema, outdoor, all the different media platforms that basically we can distribute messages on. On the left-hand side there are all the activity that clients can do with us. So there's 16 pages of assumptions behind this, by the way. And again, really happy to share all of that with you so you can look at the kind of data that we're collecting and the assumptions that we've made behind these calculations. And then you can also see on the right-hand side how we've tried to simplify it. So lots of it is based on travel, lots of it is based on time, things like that. And that's what it looks like. And essentially, what the Guardian Plus sales team are doing is, when they're coming up with an idea in a response to a brief, the idea is obviously crucial, but then what they're doing is using Ecometrics to try and play around with the media mix to see which platform might be best for that specific message. And we are absolutely not saying that CO2 is more important than the reach of an audience or the platform or the idea. For me, it's all about framing this within the industry as in how can we be innovative, how can we be creative, and how can we be sustainable? And the three should go hand in hand. It shouldn't be an or. I think hopefully we're getting past the or. This has to be and. Main point I want to say here, though, is, again, and I think we've talked about this again throughout the last 2 days. Even for me, I don't know if 21 kilograms of CO2 for an audio podcast is good or bad. I have no idea, and I've been working with this for 1.5 years. So I can't go into media agencies and expect them to understand it when I'm considered as the expert. So I really need help in framing this properly and giving it some context. So again, call to you if you've got any thoughts, really happy to have a conversation with you. Yep. So I guess where we're at the moment, the way that we're using Ecometrics within The Guardian is actually probably the incorrect way of using it. Its full potential is when the system, or when the principle of it, and I don't mind if we decouple the principle from the software, because the software doesn't belong to The Guardian. I'm just here to actually talk about CO2 and bring CO2 to life within media agencies. But for me, the next steps are to try and develop this as a benchmarking tool. I've already established a media owner and industry body working group. and that's something that we're doing in conjunction with the Media CSR Forum. There's an advertising agency group signed up to test the system because obviously this needs to fit into their other planning tools. And I'm really sorry if this is kind of a snapshot and a brain dump of the advertising industry on you guys. And there's also a creative agency working group set up because you can really imagine that when your creative agency comes to you as brands, that when they say this is the idea for your marketing campaign for the next year, and this is the production cost, then they can it feels really easy. It feels like it's the next step to say, and this is the CO2 impact of that. So I'm really excited by that area. But I guess, and I added this in yesterday, I am totally out of my depth here, and I'm quite happy to admit that, this is very much, I'm really happy to facilitate the conversations, and I'm really happy to bring all of the media owners and the relevant parties together. But when we're talking about data and when we're talking about primary and secondary data, I'm not sure what that means. So I'm really happy to collaborate and bring as many people on board as need to be to make this happen. But I get a sense from everybody having talked yesterday and today that those are the kinds of questions and those are the kinds of thoughts that we need to be holding in terms of how we bring this to almost its next beta phase, for want of a better word. So hopefully that will give you a bit of an overview of how we're engaging with our readers through inspiring and engaging content there, as I've said there, and how we're using ecometrics to try and push the conversation of CO2 and low carbon forward within a sector that hasn't necessarily adopted it quickly so far. And for us, it's a really good way of demonstrating a win-win scenario in the business because effectively, especially with a growing audience, we can generate revenue from that. And I think that, for me, is where it starts to really unlock the potential of what it means to be a sustainable, low-carbon business and economy. So that's that.